All right, guys, we're out today, but I wanted to jump in on the news. And this is one of the things that obviously we'll be diving in deep with Yat Siu, talking about Animoca Brands and their tokenization and what this is going to look like. So welcome into the show. Let's just go ahead and get started. I want to bring in Yat Siu, who is the CEO and chairman over at Animoca Brands. Great to have you back.
Great to be here again. Thanks for having me.
So, Yat Siu, I think you had some big announcements over at Token 2049. So it was like a litany of them that were coming out. And of course, even as we got on here in the pre-show, you were announcing some stuff I didn't even realize had happened. So let's just jump over to a couple of points I want to get on, and that is tokenized shares. How will this function right now? What are you guys doing in terms of setting this up?
Animoca Brands was actually not really involved in the sort of share production of this. Basically, it was, Solana and Republic organizing secondary shares of their own. They ended up pushing that over to tokenizing it on Solana, which will happen shortly under the Republic platform. And so this is obviously a security. And so what that allows people to do is to actually trade Animoca shares in the secondary markets. And just to be clear, this does not replace, an IPO, but it is a way for people, especially those who are already in the crypto markets, to own a piece of Animoca. One, Animoca secondary shares are amongst one of the most highest traded shares on secondary platforms today.
Right.
And so that's kind of the thing. So we actually have thousands of shareholders that we don't know. So we're not like a classic sort of venture capital story. So we're quite widely held. And so the second thing, though, is that when you do a transaction on secondary shares in the traditional way, whether it's through a Hive or a Forge or those kind of guys, it doesn't happen instantly. The settlement isn't right away. It takes like 1 month or 2 months sometimes. Like it takes a really long time, in some cases almost 90 days, because not just about the money, but also because of the fact that you have to source them and do stuff. It's inefficient, right? And here, basically through a tokenized platform, you can actually essentially trade secondary shares almost like a stock market. Like most of the young people are already generally, the youth is more comfortable trading in crypto or crypto-like assets rather than, having a share account, right? And I think, trading platforms like eToro or Robinhood have made it an experience that is similar to that, right? Where people don't really need to sort of have custody of the shares in the traditional sense. They just want to trade them and have essentially ownership rights over them, but, basically are okay to custody it with a party that manages for them. And so that's basically what this is, right? You can trade a tokenized asset that you can fully own, but is essentially custodied with Republic on the Solana blockchain. And why the Solana blockchain? Because a lot of the highest amount of DEX trading happens on the Solana platform. And so now I'm already on Solana. I would like to buy some shares in a company like Animoca, and this would just be the first of many, I would assume. And then from that, I can basically take my token gains and buy shares in a company. And because it's tokenized, it's kind of a similar experience. Now, because it's a security, I can't just sort of trade it like a meme coin, but I can register and do the KYC so that I qualify to buy the shares, much like you do in traditional markets. But in this case, it would be basically all on chain. So it's kind of exciting. I also like the fact that we're the first company to do it, right? Irrespective of how it trades. Because if there's one company in the world that should be leading the charge to demonstrate what it would be like to tokenize equity, I think it should be us, because we're a company that's in the intersection of both. It's kind of like eat your own dog food, right? You talked about the world, how we should tokenize everything. Well, we should be supportive of tokenizing our own shares too.
Do you feel like this model will go the X stocks method, or do you think it'll go into more of a KYC region locked approach?
It will have to go into a KYC region locked approach, except that different regions can be done on platforms like this around the world. So Republic is obviously American, but they can serve as many other countries. Obviously, we don't want our shares to be held by basically people in sanctioned countries like North Korea. So obviously that's important. That's why Republic will hopefully take care of that in a really good way. And there's a platform they've already done securitized sort of assets of different types. I'm particularly excited about what it means for startup funding. When someone does a new capital raise at a higher valuation, then seed investors might have the opportunity to sell their shares at a maybe a slight discount to the round, but still, they can get liquidity. So I think it's a great new innovation for the space that will bring in more capital for seed investing, which is of course what we want to promote with our investing approach. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is really kind of a next evolution too. I mean, you look at some of the platforms like Angel and many of those that have tried to foster seed investing. This pretty much supplants all of that activity and gives it really a lot more credibility and much more reach overall.
I think we're sort of setting the path. I know that I can't say who, but a lot of them have approached me and said, "Oh, can I do that too? Is that interesting?"
Yeah.
Right? There's a whole lineup of them coming, and I've done quite a few investing in AngelList, but I stopped doing as much as I used to, not because the companies aren't interesting, but because it wasn't very clear to me how there could be an exit in the nearer term. And also, you can't really build a relationship with a company directly. And I also don't know who else owns the shares in this. That's the other thing, right?
Exactly.
There's no ledger. I don't really. It's kind of still fund managed. So it's kind of I can't build a community around AngelList of in that sense. But with tokenization, I can, because if you own a share in Animoca and I own a share in Animoca and it's tokenized, I can prove that in my wallet ownership as well, and you can build entire communities around that. So there's a lot more power in that. And so it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I think as we get, obviously the Clarity Act and some other things here within the U.S., that's obviously going to open things up, for more
Absolutely.
investment opportunities for sure.
That's
What about, will there be a whitelist for like Mocha or Sand holders? You
for
could throw that out
one
there.
of the things. Yeah, one of the things that I would love to see, whether it's now or in the future, is the ability for people to be able to, for instance, use their tokens, such as Mocha or Sand, to buy Animoca.
Exactly.
Why not?
Yes.
Right? Yeah, and that's exciting, right? And because it's tokenized stock, there's no reason why you couldn't flip it over from stock to Sand tokens or Mocha tokens, right? Right. And if you look at yeah, exactly. And when you look at the trading volume, not even at the peak trading volumes, because obviously those were the billions a day, but even in the sort of so-called quieter markets of trading volume between Mocha and Sand, we're talking 20, 30, 40, $50 million a day. I mean, traditional stocks don't trade that much, right? Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That are sort of medium well sized. So there's actually paths of liquidity for sort of equity holders if they wanted to as well, because there's going to be a market both ways. So I mean, again, this is all at this point speculation in the sense that this is not confirmed, and it's a really, really sort of wonderful idea that's devolving. Then you can totally imagine how you could pay dividends in tokens. I mean, we're sitting on billions of dollars of tokens that we invested in. Yeah, huge, right? And there's no framework of paying dividends in tokens as an equity company, because you can't do that. And it forces us to, if you wanted to pay a dividend, it forces us to, sell the tokens to dividend cash, because that's the only way to do it. But if it's tokenized, we can give you an option to take a token. I mean, it's almost like a menu to say, hey, you know what? You own Animoca shares. We'll pay a dividend. Choose your token. I mean, I don't know, like so many cool things you could do, right? And anyway, this is why it's so exciting. Is that, look, we're going to have AI agents trade on our behalf 24/7 anyway, right? And AI agents are not really in a position to trade stock because they can't, right? And if they were able to, it'll have to be something very proprietary that's attached to whatever trading platform you're on, because it's not, able to do in a blockchain decentralized manner. So how do you access the agentic AI world? Well, it's going to be through a token, and if you have a token that represents your equity, then that's even better, because then you can open up that entire market, as an RWA, rather than just trading meme coin or Bitcoin or Ethereum or Mocha or Sand, which are great assets, but you're limiting yourself.
Hey, I'm showing, I want to show one of your tweets. This one was in reference to the GMEE platform and the GMEE token. First of all, the immediate impact of the chart influence that had. It's good for Web3 gaming, I think, in general. But when you look at that, what's happening there, give me some insights to this announcement. What do you think this does in terms of impacting Web3?
I mean, I kind of think of it as a Bitcoin ETF moment for Web3 gaming, right? Not in the sense that it's as an index, but institutional adoption and awareness of basically blockchain and Web3 gaming is not present on the NASDAQ or in public markets, because there's no company that represents that, right? The second thing, of course, is that it required institutional adoption of Bitcoin and Ethereum to basically get the price to where it is today and the attention that it has and becoming an institutional product.
Yeah.
So we got to do this for all the other assets as well, right? We shouldn't be sitting still. So I think the innovation here, and by the way, this is our big belief in DATs. I mean, we've covered and invested in like a dozen DATs And of course, now I've become a fairly substantial shareholder in AlphaTon as a result of that as well, led by Brittany Kaiser, who obviously is quite well known in the industry. Is that if your token is not in a DAT of some sort, whether it's a basket or a basically dedicated DAT, then it won't be able to have access to the institutional capital flows.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of people who are not in the traditional capital markets, but really only are in the crypto markets, don't understand that this is necessary. And it's not because a person finds it easier to buy in the stock market. Because honestly, you could buy it and put it in Coinbase, and it's not that hard, right? Actually, what is really a challenge is who's accountable, right? So, if you go to a fund manager and say, I'm going to buy some Ethereum, who's accountable for the Ethereum that you just bought? Yeah, it's not Vitalik. It's, I don't know. Or for Bitcoin. Yeah, there's this guy called Satoshi I heard about, but I don't know who he is, right? Like, that's really hard to explain to someone who's like, why did you buy this? However, if Michael Saylor is behind it, so to speak, or Tom Lee is behind it, so to speak, right? Then you point to an entity, and that entity has done the homework. I vouch for that because my reputation is on the line. So whether it's an ETF or digital asset treasury company or whatever structure, it has to be essentially legitimized in the public markets because they have high scrutiny. You have audits, you have accounting, you have the liability if you basically don't do your job, right? So GMEE now being part of a NASDAQ public company is actually a big step in, I think, what's happening in Web3 gaming. I think this will be the beginning of many of those, because the other thing is this: digital asset treasury companies are going to have to evolve to have actual revenue and utility. It's not good enough to say, let me just buy tokens and sit in it. I got to drive some revenue, and staking rewards are like 2-3%, not bad. But hey, an operating business that's profitable, GMEE is profitable, generating positive cash flows. You add on top of that, basically, that's great from an accumulation standpoint, because now you can clearly demonstrate that you are covering operating costs and making profit and accelerating that. Of course, is good for the DAT, because as it buys a token, it increases. And I think the AlphaTon hasn't yet started buying the token because it announced the intention, and it goes through the typical period as it does for closing, which means that it's yet to buy tokens. So this price rise is basically coming from the market anticipating it and understanding what's happening and being excited about the long-term prospects, right? And again, the market typically never lies, right? It shows attention of where it's going. We just need a few more gaming tokens to do what GMEE did in terms of, and who knows how much more it'll go up, and confidence will be restored fairly quickly.
Let's jump over to what's going on in the change up over on Sandbox, and obviously the new leadership, the launch of SandChain, all of this happening right now as literally as Token 2049 is going on. What can you share with us that is new on that?
People talk about new leadership, but actually it's led by Seb. So, right, Sebastian Bourget. So Seb's actually not that new to Sam. Right? He's actually, co-founder of Sandbox, right? And, you may recall there was some news about a month ago around, restructuring a Sandbox, and, someone ended up sort of posting some stuff, and, everyone loves a big sob story about, disaster and so on, right? But there was a big plan in the works, and the plan in the works was that Seb was basically going from Sandbox over to run the SandChain, which was making it more expansive, but it was kind of top secret. And so we're kind of caught in this interesting sort of catch-22. It's like, do we jump the gun? No, because we were making preparations to announce it at Token, right? And so obviously, unfortunately, we weren't able to sort of tell people, hey, don't worry about it, wait a month. But now we were able to announce it, right? And so SandChain is really that next evolution. But Seb running SandChain actually expands the universe from, basically, still serving the creator economy, but now going much deeper. In many ways, the Sandbox Metaverse interface, which is like Minecraft and Roblox, which of course is massive, was limiting in terms of its outreach. Limiting, I mean that we're basically saying you could be a creator on Sandbox within the framing of the Sandbox Metaverse, as in the Sandbox game. And that's great, but it had actually some limitations.
The other thing that I thought was interesting was, let me share my screen here. In my opinion, one of the things that we've been kind of interested in, and that is under the new leadership, one, of course, was the mobile element, which is something that we've said, hey, this has got to happen eventually. But now it looks like it's going to actually occur. with the new
Yes.
leader there with Robbie, how fast have you guys pretty much just said, hey, we're gonna pull the shackles off of the Sandbox team and let them run, or what was the plan here in terms of new innovation?
The Sandbox probably was shackled in a way. To be frank, the founders always wanted to build something bigger with SandChain. And no,
Mhm.
mobile experiences, definitely a priority. I don't want to jump the gun, but you should be seeing stuff soon, is what I can say. It's going to be very, very
Good.
cool, that new evolution, right? So there are a lot of things happening there.
Well, and I think you look at what's happening in Web3, you have to jump to this story right here, and this is kind of our big topic today of what I want to go to. Let me share my screen there. And this, of course, is EA now being acquired by the Saudis. This is the largest ever private equity buyout. This was crazy. Is there any particular EA franchise that you think is going to at least going to a Web3 route? Anything that you're watching right now?
Well, first of all, I think all of them are quite ideal for Web3 route, right? However,
Yeah.
we also have to look at what asset type that EA has that is not just compatible, but also easiest to control. Like, for instance, everyone's
Mhm.
super excited about FIFA. It's totally understandable. However, with FIFA, you have to work with, licensing. It's not exactly, 100% theirs, right? That kind of stuff. But then if you look at something like The Sims, which is something that's entirely owned by EA, then yeah, maybe you could take an asset like that and create a tokenized version in the future. But having said that, I actually don't think that that's really in the highest framework of thinking right now for EA. I think the
Okay.
tokenization efforts will come much more from other companies or the ones who make mods. But I think it's a very bullish signal in terms of gaming for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, demonstrates the value of the gaming ecosystem. I mean,
Yeah.
well, I thought it was 55 billion, but anyway, somewhere between 52 to 55 billion. That's like, a huge number. It almost feels like a couple of billion is just a rounding error, which in this math it is, right? So it just demonstrates how big it is. The other thing is that if you look at what happened to Take-Two stock, right, that basically, went up like, almost like 5 or 10%, which their market cap is
Yeah.
pretty big. And now I think the other thing that's understated is that it's now basically owned by partially a PE firm, which means that they're going to try to drive returns, which means that they're going to be more commercial about it, which drives the
Mhm.
need to look at things like tokenization, blockchain, and they might be looking at it almost more as an RWA of their gaming assets rather than, basically a virtual native asset. Stablecoins and gaming have incredible potential, and that's not controversial at all, right? Because they're trying to drive profits. You can expect, and gamers might hate that, but they're going to probably increase prices in either a soft or a hard way. We don't know. Someone's going to pay for that acquisition, right? And
No
you
doubt.
basically drive the line, right? I was on your show talking about GTA 6 back then and saying GTA 6 is going
Mhm.
to trigger that increased price point. That won't happen until next year. And actually, with EA, it might happen sooner, like maybe even as
Yeah,
soon
I
as
was
this
going to say.
Christmas. Now, just to be clear, when people do this, they plan to relist the companies. So they're going to want to take it public again. And they recognize the other thing. For a business of its size, right, and the number of users it can reach, I would say
Huge.
55 billion is a steal. It's a steal, right?
You've got FIFA over 280 million sold, Sims, like you mentioned, Need for Speed, Madden NFL, all that. Then you've got the new Project Reen, I guess, on Sims that we're in the middle of building out a lot of infrastructure around economies, which could go tokenized. And then you even now with Pokemon Go, because this is all part of this. So this was a tweet that was quite a while ago. This was from Sebastian. It was in
Yes.
reference to the partnership there, obviously with the Saudis.
Yep.
It just seems like there's a lot here because you look at that goes all the way back to 2023. So I just wonder if maybe the Saudis were kind of starting to really understand where this market was going, and maybe this is just the
Oh,
pathway in which it's trying to get there.
so yeah. So to be clear, the Saudis, they have this sort of strategy vision to essentially turn Saudi into a much more digital economy. The sort of PIF basically has set aside it's 38 billion, whatever. It was like the largest gaming fund, is the largest gaming fund in history
Mhm.
to basically look at investing in games. And they are actually already shareholders in many large public game companies. And they were quite excited about the potential of what ownership means in gaming. So they were early, doing partnership with Sandbox. And as you might recall, NEOM, which is also part
Yep.
of Saudi, is a investor and partner at Animoca Brands. That was announced like I don't know, a year and a half ago or something. You think about it, right? A sovereign state organization becoming a shareholder in a private company and a
Yeah.
partner to do what? In this case, obviously, blockchain and Web3 related stuff, including gaming. So the Saudis have always been quite forward thinking in that direction. So I think it's just a demonstration of how they've approached it. So, and for those of you who may not know, this wasn't the first gaming company they'd acquired. I mean, they had acquired Scopely before, right?
Yep.
And that's really become sort of, being very successful for them, I guess, gave them an appetite to go even bigger.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because when you look at EA, this was a pivotal move that I think starts to really maybe set the stage for where we might see Web3 integration coming faster, much like what you mentioned there with GTA 6. On the bad news side of things, we've got all sorts of failures happening. Futureverse fell, Karate Combat's out, Pulsar, a whole litany of different projects that are either shuttering or shutting down. Is there anything that you can give me that is good news? I mean, we're hearing a lot of good news, but those are also bad things that are happening for Web3. Why do you think that is?
Well, look, I mean, I think the reality is that, Web3 is not immune to business failures. Or like take it GMEE. I mean, GMEE really sort of had a decline, especially when the TON ecosystem wasn't sort of as in vogue, shall we say, right? Some builders might just throw in the towel and say, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. That's kind of difficult, right? That does happen, right? Right. But this team stuck it through and kept fighting and kept going. And you see this also with Sandbox as well. And Seb's out there on, talking, presenting and promoting, you need that, right? So I think you got to look at the team. At the end of the day, most of Web3 projects, regardless of it, not even being games, are still very much in the startup phase. You got to bring attention. And I sometimes even get people telling me like, are you doing any work? As a host, like out there in sort of conferences. Of course I do work, right? But the point is that, would you rather that I basically just, not show up and apparently sort of work behind the scenes and make things happen? That's not how the world works anymore. Who are the most successful entrepreneurs today? Like, look at Elon Musk. I mean, if he was quietly working behind the scenes, would people even care, right?
No,
Like
he's out in front
so the point is,
all the time.
yeah, you have to. I mean, if you're a leader, you got to goddamn lead. Sorry, but that's the fact, right? And now everything is media, and you have to understand that. And if you don't,
that's the problem.
you're not gonna
It's
make
a
it.
problem, but also a benefit. Yeah, for at least
Yes,
for I
correct.
think the whole idea. If you listen to Gary Vee on his whole momentum economy, that's
Yeah,
the way it works. Is once you get momentum
he has a
going,
he has.
then it's the attention
That's right.
side, and you amplify and boom. Which is I think what we've seen with some of these projects that unfortunately they've lost the attention. Are you worried about any of the drop off in venture funding? It was down like 93% in Q2 of 25.
It'll first of all, it'd be replaced by tokenization. But the second thing, I'm not worried
Yeah.
about that. And the reason I'm not worried about it is that if people get out, it's an opportunity for others. So what happens when capital goes out? Well, it's great for companies like us because we get better deals at better prices,
Yeah,
right? Okay, and
for
then
sure.
there's
Good
success,
deals.
and then everyone starts rolling in and saying they want to do that. So again, but you do need to have conviction, right? And I would argue that many of those projects that have failed, how
Yeah,
front and center were the founders? Where were they? Are they
exactly. Some
constantly
of
sort
them
of
got to go
pushing?
away. It's just that it's that simple.
Yes,
Some of them just have to go away.
yes,
You know.
yes, exactly. And some of them also didn't want to be in the public face, right? They were like, I
Yeah.
just want to quietly build and just don't bother me. And that's not how it works, at least if you want to build in crypto,
No.
right? You got personalities like Luca, for instance. What is the premium that Pengu has over other similar tokens? It's Luca.
Bingo.
Okay, literally,
Yeah.
right? Right. And we've got some teams like that, like with AnyChess, for instance. It's a smaller project, right? And we've got we did a team did a Kaido sale 5 times oversubscribed, and with Chevy we got a guy who's front and center. He's out there. He's
Wow.
talking all the time about the project, right? So
Yeah.
you gotta have that. So I would say look at the teams who are out there, show how committed they are, because remember, it's not only about whether they're out there shilling or whatever. It's out there putting their name and their reputation on the line, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yat Siu, it's
So,
always
yeah.
great having you on. Big announcements. So thanks for coming in on the show today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, you guys, if you're not part of the Diamond Circle, make sure and get in on that right now. It's our own private group. You can jump in on that. It's free. Just click the link down below. Follow me on X @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on The Paul Barron Show.